The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading. Well, we did get a little bit of a recovery bounce in corn and beans and bean meal in particular on Wednesday. Mixed action in the wheat and a good, strong day across the livestock sector as a whole. Joining us now to talk about these markets and give us some perspective on things here midweek, Mike Zuzolo with Global Commodity Analytics is with us here today on the show. Mike, always good to talk with you, my friend. Thanks for joining us. And I guess I want to start here and love your thoughts on this. I'm seeing a lot of doom and gloom amongst farmers and ranchers talking on social media, in the coffee shop, et cetera right now. And for good reason. I mean, prices just not looking very friendly, especially after Monday's set of USDA reports. What's your feeling? What are you hearing from folks? And what would you say to folks who are maybe getting a little too doom and gloom at these price levels right now?
You know, it's interesting you bring that up, Jesse, because I just got back from doing a couple crop insurance meetings with a really great firm I've known for over 30 years in Northwest Ohio. And we did two meetings, one before the report, one after. We had about 130, 140 people at the meeting, but I probably talked to an extra 20 people throughout the course of the day and a half that I was on the road. And two of the conversations I had were extremely valuable to me. Excuse me. One client I stopped at, we did a crop tour at, you'll see some pictures here in a little bit. I've known him for 30 plus years. He was one of my very first clients. Drove the next night into central Illinois and had breakfast with a brand new client. Both of those two guys and their operations, and I think their families, had one thing in common. And while I'm sitting there talking to both of them about a 2014 style market still because of the USDA report and another leg lower because of the soybeans leading the market lower again, similar to 2014, there was no doom and gloom talk. We had our head up, we had our pencils out. My sense over the course of the last 30 years of doing this is as soon as you start thinking doom and gloom, it will be doom and gloom, and you will make marketing decisions that impact you, I think, more negatively than positively. So I don't care if the price of corn is at $3.50, you still say to yourself, this is just 1 year, I'm a good producer, and I can kick this market the next year, or this year is not over. Whatever it takes, don't get into the doom and gloom cycle.
That's some great advice. I want to talk about your crop tour you mentioned. I'll pull up your route map here. And there's been a lot of talk as well the past couple of days, especially after those record national prints from USDA for both corn and beans. A lot of folks questioning, is that crop really out there? And so walk us through what you saw. I'll pull up some of those pictures you referenced here in a second. But, I mean, in your opinion, Mike, from what you saw, is that record crop out there across the Midwest?
I will not argue with USDA on their assessment from this week, 183 and 53 plus on corn and beans. But I do argue, and this is important going into a major crop tour that's getting started here and several others that will be going on in the central and eastern corn belt that I traveled, which, as you see, was all north of I-70 and would have been only central Illinois and no southern Indiana, southern Illinois, and all northern Missouri. That corn yield to me, Jesse, is made. The best corn right now is starting to dent. It's starting to drop ears. The corn that, because of the variability of the springtime planting, the corn that is just now shooting tassels or just now pollinating does not have the girth and does not have the ear that the earlier corn did. And so I would be very surprised if we were above 183 when it's all said and done. And I would not be surprised if we had to pull a bushel and a half off of that 183.1 if we don't get the rains that are expected the next 10 days. So I think that I feel very solid about, and I'll close the whole thing off this way. I talked to two clients. I had a heck of a time in Missouri figuring out what was going on, because I saw some really great stuff. But as I got past Chillicothe, Missouri, and headed towards I-35 and Cameron, back closer to home, and that's where the bunch of those hearts are, where I go to in eastern, northeastern Kansas. The crop on the hills was literally burning up. I mean, it was zeros. So I called one of my best clients in Missouri, right in that area, and I said, I can't figure this crop out because we've got the eastern crop that's very variable, just shooting tassels, just pollinating. What's your take? He said, last year I didn't have any zeros in my corn. This year the hills will give me zeros. And that just happened 2 weeks ago with that heat. I had another client tell me the exact same thing in Ohio, in northwestern Ohio. So believe it or not, and we'll go through this again, but I'll say it twice, Ohio and Kansas are my anchors in terms of yield. In other words, not only are they my anchors in terms of determining yield, but they're my anchors in terms of probably pulling down yield if we don't see good weather from here.
Mike, first picture I'll pull up here. This was in Ohio, which you're talking about, and walk through some of what you saw in Ohio a little bit more with us.
Yeah, Indiana, especially as I got into the heart of Indiana, a little bit of difficulty in western Indiana with what looked to be some delayed plantings, a little bit of thinner stands, but then it got beautiful, and it was all the way that way to Dayton, Ohio. And so almost all this corn along I-70 from an I-74 from essentially Crawfordsville, Indiana to Dayton, Ohio was just the best I'd ever seen. I didn't get a lot of samples on that first leg out because I drove about 12, 13 hours that day. So I was moving and shaking, but that's where I think USDA can say we're above 180 because of that corn right there.
All right, another picture as well, and walk us through where this picture was at, Mike.
Yeah, this would have been in what you would say northeastern, getting close to north central Indiana. It would have been north and a little bit east of Indianapolis. This guy took me out on his four-wheeler, and we went around for about 45 minutes checking fields, and these beans were absolutely loaded, and he is looking at record yields because of the pod counts. Very few fields you could find anything wrong with them. No disease pressure. The only thing he had, and you can see that because I did a zoom in here, is a lot of those pods are flat. And so this rain this next 7 days, if we're really going to have 53 bushels or more on a national yield in soybeans, especially with that acreage base that USDA threw at us, because my general rule of thumb, Jesse, is you take the acreage base bigger, it's going to be harder to get higher yields because of the wideness of the bean belt now. So, I mean, it could be 53, and maybe USDA could go a little higher. I'm already hearing from Illinois clients, though, that they've got some disease pressure. So I'm not ready to say that the bean yield can't go up, but I think it'd be a push at this point. But the pods are there to make it go up, I think, in some of these key areas.
Well, and we think about crop tours like the one you took. Other folks have been taking them. We have more on the way. Plus, you combine that with all the various, NDVI data we have, the weather models. For instance, this map I'll pull up on the video feed, the Vegetative Health Index. I mean, we have a lot of data at our fingertips to try and narrow in on what this crop potential is. Will we ever exactly 1000% no? I think that's a question, but we can get a pretty solid idea here, Mike.
I think we can at these yield levels, especially. It's not like we're guessing on either acres or yield at this point, because we are pretty maxed out, if you ask me, on both. But what I said a minute ago, and this is an interesting diagram, because the top map is a vegetative health index from NOAA as of just a few days ago. The bottom map is the exact same area for the exact same time period, August 10th or August 12th for 2023. So exactly a year ago. And you notice first, not the rectangles. The first thing you see is the big red splotch in southern Minnesota and very tip of northern Iowa. I think that was covered by USDA's acreage base shifts. So I'm not going to look at that as hard now as I was looking at it with these acreage changes. But as I said a minute ago, the white rectangles, where I was, the bold white rectangle, right where I was given meetings, it is not nearly as good on the veg index as it was a year ago in that part of Ohio. And I think I saw it, and I heard a lot of producers tell me we got clipped by rain and we got a lot of thin stands, and it's going to be very difficult to have what we had last year. Same thing with Kansas. You see that smaller, less thick rectangle. The state of Kansas, especially as you get in the western half, you don't have hardly any blues this year at all in the state of Kansas, all the way from central Kansas to the west, north and south, Jesse, until you get to the Nebraska border. Look how we were last year at this time. And I'll just remind everybody, Kansas planted the biggest acreage, and they're now number 5 in planted acres in this country. And so they really matter in corn. And I've seen it the past years I've been out here. The genetics have really pushed more corn and at the expense of hard red wheat.
We are talking today with Mike Zuzolo from Global Commodity Analytics here on Market Talk. Mike, let's summarize this a little bit, and I know we've alluded to this as well. We're going to have more boots on the ground here the next couple of weeks, trying to get some more, firsthand confirmation of the size of this year's crop. Obviously, the grain markets in general, just the bearish onslaught has really continued. Soybeans have been hit hard the last couple of days, especially. I guess your perspective, kind of an overall perspective here in the grains, what do farmers need to think about? Some people have been chatting about, could we see that harvest rally later this year, things like that. I guess, what's your overarching thing you would want to tell folks to really keep in mind here as we navigate this market right now?
Yeah, and I'm going to give a big qualifier here. I really can't give specifics anymore. So I'm going to talk to you, Jesse, like you're a brokerage client or a subscriber. And this is not meant for people that don't understand the risk of commodities. Because if you never traded commodities, don't start now. As far as not understanding the risks, you got to do your homework on understanding the risks of commodities at these prices. And so, having said that, I presented, and I believe, and we've talked about it for a couple months now, that we are still under a 2014 model year, where it's the beans that are probably going to lead us another leg lower. And that leg lower in 2014, the corn consolidated in December and then was pulled lower by beans. And the beans went down to almost $9, $9.10, I think was their low in November beans at the end of September. I could see almost the exact same type scenario develop, because 15 minutes after the crop report, I heard already in Chicago, crop's going to get bigger, crop tours coming out, it's going to show bigger yields. And I think that's the danger. And so what you have to have is something that short circuits another leg lower in soybeans. And what that means is you either miss the rains this week, as we discussed, or you have the corn and wheat come around and bring the support that we've been waiting for and waiting for and waiting for. And that crop report this week gave us that support. And we still have unanswered questions on Brazil's corn. We just saw CONAB come out the day of or the day after the USDA report. They're still at 116. That's 6 million less than USDA. And for Brazil corn, Ukraine is now talking about, one of their agrarian councils is talking about 21 million tons. USDA is at 27. I really think the global wheat and global corn stocks are diminished. We have the supplies in corn, and we're in pole position to get more demand. We just got to get a break in the dollar, a rally in copper, and a rally in crude oil. Those are the dominoes that need to fall essentially right now. And I told clients this morning when I came back in the office, the 378 SEP corn futures lead month, the 1019 lead month bean futures with August going off the board today, those are must-haves on a weekly close this week to regain and negate the negative sentiment in this market. And soft red wheat is already above its lows from 2 weeks ago. That was when we had that crash in the stock market.
Fantastic thoughts there and insight for sure. And I know on the cash side with beans, I believe I saw a couple 8 prints along the Mississippi River here for cash bids as well. So hopefully we could find some of those lows you were talking about here and get a bounce. I want to talk about currencies as well. We got the CPI data out Wednesday morning. I know we've had PPI out as well. Some talk amongst folks on Wall Street that these numbers may be supportive, could help point to that eventual rate cut being talked about in September, things like that. I mean, talk about that, and we can weave in some thoughts here as well. You were mentioning Brazil, some of what we're waiting on there, things like that. So, I mean, Talk about this overarching picture as well a little bit more, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, this is why you do such a good job, Jesse, is because you really place the diagrams and the visuals right where they need to be. And this really kind of caps and is a capstone to what we just got done talking about. The people I spoke to in Northwestern Ohio and the clients I spoke to on the way up and way back really get it. They really understand that these currencies mean a lot, especially with the election and especially with all these trade sanctions that we have in place. These two newswire stories just came out, the 13th and the 14th. Both of them reference how the wheat market is getting hit, in my opinion, because we just got a 10-month low registered in the Russian ruble because Ukraine crossed over into Russia. So when you tell me, or I suggest at these meetings, that the currencies really matter and it's the funds and the fundamentals that have to be combined when we look at our prices, I think these two newswire stories really promote that idea as being valid. The bean one is even better. When I talked about CONAB going down to a 115.8, 115, or going from a 115.9 to a 115.7 on corn for 23-24, they took the exports up even with that decline in the crop production, exactly because of the Brazilian currency. You and I have talked about the Brazilian real and what it's doing to us right now. And China and Brazil are only getting closer and closer and closer in terms of political and trade ties. So this is just one of those slides that you look at and you say, okay, what is Mike really talking about? What's Jesse really allowing Mike to present? And this is it in real time.
Very, very true. And the currencies play a role in the protein sector as well. I want to touch on livestock with you here today before we wrap it up too, because livestock trade, pretty solid day Wednesday. Solid day across the board. Good, strong gains. Cattle, hogs, a nice rebound with August hogs going off the board. I guess you look at proteins as a whole, you look at the demand picture there, et cetera. We're getting close to Labor Day. I mean, what's your feeling in the livestock trade right now, Mike? Are you feeling a little better than the grains? Are we still cautious? What are you thinking right now?
Yeah, this is where I'd split up my timing mindset as far as how I feel about them. Coming back from the trip, a lot of hay being baled. And I thought of the old farmer saying, make hay while the sun's shining. I feel that way about the cattle market. You still got that 185, 186 cash market. You still got the corn that is not supported yet because the wheat hasn't made its bottom. You got the peak of the Labor Day buying. You're talking about Labor Day. You got the peak of the Labor Day buying right now in the packer mindset, if you ask me, Jesse. And most important was what USDA did. They bumped the Q3 cattle price to 193. That was up $3. They bumped the Q4 up to 190. That was up $2. You got everything going for you right now in cattle. So you better go and you better perform, because I still am very nervous about the end of August. And I will say one last hurdle this week that maybe is holding the cattle back a little bit, other than the tepid market in hogs, which did not get a good USDA report because they took exports down for both 24 and 25 pork. But that Home Depot earnings number, I've heard a lot about that on Wall Street, very consumer sensitive. And now we've got coming out the Walmart numbers at the end of this week. That's consumer plus food consumer sensitive. So if I can get past that without any negative news and Wall Street doesn't hurt us, I would expect we get some movement to the upside to be able to hedge by the end of the month.
Always an interesting perspective on things, Mike. We do appreciate your time and insight here on the show, as always. If folks want to reach out to you and talk with you, take a look at your research and much more, how can they get in touch with you, Mike?
Yeah, good time. As I always say, it's a great time right now, and I'll be doing a special crop report for the weekend for the trial and the clients and subscribers. So globalcomresearch.com, and it's globalcom with 2 M's, research.com. There's a trial sign up on the website.
Mike Zuzolo, Global Commodity Analytics. Thanks for being with us again here this week on Market Talk, Mike, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you, Jesse. Take care, sir, and thanks for having me.
Make sure to subscribe to the Market Talk YouTube channel. You can watch our latest interviews with top market analysts in the country, find bonus content, and much more. It's easy. Just go to youtube.com/@MarketTalkAg and hit the subscribe button. Or you can search for Market Talk Ag on YouTube.